review. Typically, I will, especially at HOG, we always try and bring our parents back, try and get their input. We like to see what their biggest concern is, their chief complaint, and what they would like to work on in speech therapy. We ask, especially with individuals with autism, we try and ask about their routines, social supports they might have. We try and ask about previous therapies, if they've had previous therapies, as far as speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and what they've worked on in those previous therapies. And we want to know if that worked or if it didn't. We always value the input that the parent has to contribute. And then we also want to know about their strengths, what the parent feels is their strengths, and also their areas of growth. So once we've finished the parent interview, we typically like to have some kind of observation of the child. This can be the child interacting with others, other clients, interacting with other adults, or with the parent. But it's always nice to kind of get that observation so we can kind of get a feel for the child and for their communication. Next, typically during an assessment process, we would administer a standardized assessment for insurance purposes. So we would, depending on the kind of communication that we're wanting to look at, we might administer a language assessment or a fluency assessment or a feeding assessment. We might administer one or both, multiple assessments to see if services are warranted. And finally, I try and do every assessment. I try to do an oral MEC examination. And that's basically just looking at the client's oral mechanism. And so just looking at the muscles in their mouth, making sure they have good range of motion with their tongue, checking for tongue and lip ties, just making sure they have good, muscles as far as their cheeks and everything. So that's something that we always try and do with every evaluation that we complete. Another part of the therapy process I wanted to talk about is goal development. So goals kind of provide a roadmap for the specific skills and strategies that we will include in a treatment program. So parent and client input is highly valued and is always taken into consideration. One of the first questions I always ask a parent is what they feel like they would like to work on, or what they would like to see their child or their client improve on. So typically we try and write goals that use this SMART acronym. And so we try to write goals that are specific, so narrow for effective planning, measurable, so it provides a mean to track progress, attainable, so we try and write long and short-term goals. Typically, I like to write goals in our outpatient setting. We write goals that we would like clients to meet in a 3-month period. And then long-term goals are goals that we would like the client to meet before discharge. And then we always like to write relevant goals, so goals that align with long-term objectives and just the long-term effects for the child too, just what we would like the child to be able to do long-term. And then timely. So we try and write realistic but ambitious goals. Especially for insurance purposes, we like to write goals that we feel like kids can meet within that 3-month period. Insurance really likes to see that growth, and they like to see goals met. So we want to be sure that we show progress in that way as well. So I know several of you guys had mentioned AAC when you introduced yourself, so feel free to jump in if you have any experiences that you would like to share or any input or words of wisdom. But one of the intervention techniques that I wanted to talk about today was AAC, so augmentative and alternative communication. So this is just the definition according to the American Speech Hearing Association. Augmentative and alternative communication is used by people who some or all the time cannot rely on their speech. So it incorporates the individual's full communication abilities, and it can include any existing speech, vocalizations, gestures, manual signs, and aided communication. It allows for multiple ways to communicate and can supplement or compensate either temporarily or permanently for impairment of individuals with expressive communication disorders. And so with AAC comes low tech versus high tech AAC. So low tech would be if you use gestures, facial expressions, writing, drawing, pointing to pictures or words, like using a picture exchange communication system. And then there's also high tech, which is an example of that would be using an app on an iPad or using a computer with a voice, which is a speech generating output device. And devices can also be a combination of both low tech and high tech. So I just wanted to put some pictures in here of some different AAC devices. These are just ones that I have worked with in the past, ones that I have a lot of exposure to. So the first one here, this green one, this is a Go Talk. And this one has as you can kind of notice, you can see the green that I'm scrolling through right here. It has the key guards on it, which help with accessibility as far as being able to touch. If there's any restriction of movement, the key guards really help with being able to touch the correct picture that they're trying to identify and use. We have the 4-button system right down here. This is one that we use a lot when we're introducing, trying to introduce a picture system, picture exchange system. So it has the 4 different buttons with a picture correlating at the top, and you can push at the top. And then at the top here, the top right, I have a picture of the SnapCore system by Toby Dynavox. I know one of you guys had mentioned this system. This is one that I find myself using a lot in the clinic. I have several older clients that use this system, and I think it's just the age of the individuals that I'm treating, but this is one that I've become fairly familiar with, and overall, I think it's beneficial. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about with AAC is common concerns. So sometimes there's concerns with the age, skills, and then also timing of using an AAC. So AAC helps people of all ages, sometimes even younger than 3 years old. So it can be used as an early intervention tool, but it can also be used for, all the way, it can be used from, 2 years old all the way up until, really all the way up, until for somebody's lifespan. It can be a really good tool to use. So there's not really an age limit on the use of AAC. And then talking and motivation is also often a common concern. So AAC does not stop someone from learning to use their voice or slow down language development. Recent research actually supports that AAC can help with language development. So as a child is learning, to use this AAC device, it's really kind of giving them a jump with their language and helping them kind of formulate all those connections. And then one of the other common concerns is movement. And there are ways to use an AAC device without touch. Speech therapists often work with OTs and PTs to determine the best approach to using a device. We do a lot of interdisciplinary work at HOG when introducing a device to an individual that receives multiple services. It's one of the things we take pride in. And many devices have options for key guards, like I mentioned in the previous picture, for assist when you do use touch. And one of the other intervention techniques that I wanted to touch on in speech therapy is social skills. So this is targeting goals related to social communication. Social skills may take place in a group setting or during a one-on-one treatment session. Social skills are the skills that we use every day to interact and communicate with others. So this includes, verbal and nonverbal communication. It can include speech, gesture, facial expression, and body language. And there are a lot of benefits to social skills therapy. It can lead to improved relationships, lead to a desire to participate in social interactions, and it can lead to decreased stress and anxiety. I was able to use social skills during my externships at EKU, and I do a lot of social skills therapy while I'm at hog therapy as well. And so this is a social skills hierarchy that I find myself using a lot with kiddos with autism. I like to start by introducing the social skill. So explaining the skill, explaining the role and how to use it. So if we were talking about having a conversation to someone, I would explain, why it's important to have a conversation, the beginning of a conversation, the introduction, asking questions, and then also ending a conversation or maintaining a conversation. And so I use a lot of videos, to show examples of good conversation skills and examples of conversations that might need improvement. And so once you're able to introduce the topic, I like to work on defining it. So in this stage, we play a lot of games. We categorize steps to use the skill, and we use a lot of visual prompts. So using prompts to remember maybe the steps of a conversation or questions that we can ask people during a conversation, or ways that we can greet people or tell them goodbye. Once we kind of are able to define, we work on practicing. So, role playing, how to have a conversation, role playing different topics, use videos to model, having peer models, and then also through comic strips. The possibilities are really endless as far as practicing. And then finally, we work on generalizing the skill. So in this stage, we practice the skill in multiple natural settings if possible, with a variety of communication partners. And this is not my hierarchy. This is something I found from Creative Behavior Intentions from their website, but I use this a lot and I find it really effective. And another social skills curriculum that I really like is the Superflex. It's a superhero social thinking curriculum. And I use this when I taught a social skills group at EKU, and then we also use it a lot at hog therapy. Our OTs and our speech therapists use it a lot. Superflex is a superhero character who teaches kids that they have a superhero inside themselves in their own brains, and it helps them learn about their own thoughts and each other's thoughts. And it helps them work on flexible thinking and giving them strategies to self-regulate during challenging times. So Superflex is this character that you can see in the picture on the left here. He has the powers to provide people with flexible thinking and problem-solving skills. And the villains that he has to defeat are the unthinkables. And each unthinkable is, has a specific aspect of social behavior, and it will lead an individual or lead the characters to do something unexpected. And so each student is kind of encouraged to learn these unthinkables, be able to describe them and what they do, and to be able to provide strategies that they can use if the unthinkables were to attack them or to attack Superflex. And so it's a really good way to be able to learn about social skills and be able to learn about them in this context, and then to be able to apply them into the student or the client's life. And so the curriculum is meant for ages 5 to 10. Then there's a curriculum for ages 9 to 12, but I've actually used it all the way up until teenager, early adult years. I find it applicable. You can use it for older children as well. And then my last point for social skills is peer training. I feel like this is really important. It's really kind of a form of advocacy. I feel like the child should not be solely responsible for fostering relationships. So things that you guys can kind of do, parents, friends can kind of do. is, speak to the child's class about strengths, interests, and ways to be a good friend. Or the child could do this themselves if they feel comfortable. Inquire about a buddy program at school, see if there are any actions in place for that. Speaking with friends and neighbors to educate children about autism and being a good friend, and encouraging professionals, whether that's within the school system or elsewhere, to partake in professional development on inclusion. One of the other points I wanted to talk about is reasons for discharge from speech therapy. So there are many reasons that there could be a discharge from speech therapy. And for this specifically, I'm kind of speaking from an outpatient therapy perspective. But for some of the reasons for discharge could include insurance regulations. So insurance, they really like to see progress toward goals. They do not like to see if a client is plateauing. So we are always trying to formulate goals. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we're trying to formulate goals that are ambitious, but also attainable, and that we want to be able to see progress on. And sometimes insurance can limit the number of visits that they are able to provide a client. And so there are times when an individual only has a 20 or 25 visit max, then, at the end of that, we might be looking at discharge just because of that max that the insurance provides. We always try and see if there's any other way we can continue services, but that sometimes is a possibility. And that goes with what insurance believes is medically necessary. I will say, typically, when there is an autism diagnosis, we're able to request more visits. So that has been very beneficial. And then another reason for discharge, of course, is satisfaction with progress and age-appropriate skills. So sometimes we discharge when, our compensatory strategies, so strategies that we're teaching the children and the parents to use, if they've been successfully established, and we feel, and the parents feel, and the client feels that they're ready, might be a time that we go ahead and discharge. And then another reason would be for finances or for extended holds. Sometimes in the outpatient setting, if we have a client on hold for a prolonged amount of time, we might be looking at discharge. For example, if you were, to be seen and then we're unable to make it into therapy for several months, if it's been an extended, prolonged amount of time, we might be looking at discharge just because for insurance purposes, for one, but also by the time if we need to do pick services back up, we might need to go ahead and reevaluate to see where the skills currently are, if there's been any change there. And I also wanted to talk about home education practice. So this is just kind of something that we use to, it's a set of tasks that a patient is taught by their therapist to be completed at home. And it's meant to complement and reinforce the learned skills in the clinic or in any setting as far as speech therapy. And home practice is key in effective intervention. I think you guys all know this, but we only see the client 1 or 2 times a week for 30 minutes each. So we're likely seeing the client 30 minutes to an hour per week. So we, definitely pride ourselves in being able to help teach those skills, but the caregivers are really important in being able to help generalize these skills and use them, utilize them in the home setting and being able to carry that over into the school setting or in their work setting, any setting that they're going to be spending time in. So I always recommend to my parents to choose, 1 time a day and take about 5 to 10 minutes to work on a newly learned skill. There has to kind of be a balance with the home education practice or with working on it at home. While you guys are definitely around the client more, we want to make sure that they still have time, they still have a place where they can go, where they do not always have to be working on the skills that they're learning, especially if it's a client that's attending school, receiving services in school, and then also going to an outpatient clinic receiving services. We want them to be able to have a place where they can kind of rest and relax and kind of unwind at the end of the day. So this is just my email. Just wanted to, put that there. If there's anything that I didn't touch on, if you want to ask questions, if you don't want to ask in front of a group, you're welcome to email me. And if it's a question I can't answer, I will do my best to find somebody that can answer it for you. But that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing the screen just so you guys are able, we can all see each other. Feel free, hop on if you have any other questions, any comments, anything you'd like to add.
I do have one comment. I just wanted to say thank you so much for saying towards the beginning of your presentation that it is useful to use AAC early because it actually helps facilitate language. I've been saying that for years and years and years, and the science is backing it up. And I'm glad that other, speech language pathologists, I'm not one, but I'm glad that speech language pathologists are picking up on that, because early on I was told it's too early for my son to have AAC, it's too early, and I kind of pushed the issue. And that was super useful to continue pushing the issue, because he was able to have a little bit of language where other people in our group that have his same diagnosis, Christensen syndrome, their children don't speak at all. So I'm really glad that you said that. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I appreciate your comment. Yes. A lot of the research, just like you said, a lot of the science, a lot of the research is really pointing to early intervention, of course, in all aspects, but definitely with AAC as well. And with that, I don't necessarily mean that we have to be taking, having a 2-year-old using an iPad to communicate, but giving them the tools, even if it's a picture exchange system with Velcro, or just something to be able to request their basic wants and needs, and be able to communicate with, with their loved ones. I think that's very empowering, and absolutely. I see all of the benefits of it, helping develop other language skills. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, I guess it sounds like nobody else has any questions. I was able to get this on YouTube Live, but not Facebook Live, but I'll be posting it later. So did anybody else have any questions for Miss Megan before she goes?
Miss Megan, I've got a question. I've heard it talked about, like, if a child doesn't speak by a certain age, what is the likelihood? Because I know that there's really just a lot of a strong push to get early intervention. And have you read any of the literature on that? Like, if a child is not able to have language or communicate using language by 5, 6, 7 years of age, what the likelihood that they will be able to speak at a later age?
That's a wonderful question. I do not have an exact answer for you, but I have, supported by evidence-based research or anything. But from, my experience and for what, the information that I've learned, I think there might not be a hard, fast age, especially with, typically girls develop language and they develop their language skills and speech skills a little quicker than boys do, and so there's that factor to consider as well. But I think that there is enough research to support that the the later, the more a child ages, the further, the older they get, there's kind of a language window that, that children have. And the further they get away from that language window, I think is, the percentage probably does decrease a little bit. But that's a great question. I don't think there is an age that they've attached to it or anything. Might be something that further research is needed on.
Yeah, as our son got older and we did all kinds of speech therapy, finally the conversation became around the apraxia. And so it was very, that was a hard, diagnosis to get because but I do know that he has the desire to communicate. It's just the motor planning, the ability to be able to do those things is really, really, really difficult for him. And so I'm sure that kind of plays into, for some kids, why they're not able to speak, even though there's been great speech therapy services being provided to them. When you're a speech therapist, are there red flags that you pick up on if it's a language delay, speech delay, language disorder, and or apraxia? Is there a way that you all are taught to tease that apart to figure out which one is which?
Yes, we are kind of given red flags to kind of look for as far as discerning that. I know one of the big ones that we kind of look for is apraxia. That's kind of the difficulty with motor execution. So being able to get, your thoughts that you have, in your brain and be able to convey that to your mouth and be, it's that motor execution. And so a lot of the errors that individuals with apraxia, from the research that I've read, is a lot of times it's inconsistent. The difficulty that they have is inconsistent as far as the sounds that they have trouble with, or the different words that they're trying to say. So that's something that we really are trying to look for is, are the errors consistent, or if they're inconsistent, signs kind of point toward apraxia as opposed to a language delay.
And is there, I'm sorry, I don't mean to hog all the questions, but is there a specific protocol of therapy or treatment that a speech therapist would pursue when they're aware that the child, the client, has apraxia that's different than these other kinds of communication needs?
Yeah, I do think that there are individual treatment models, treatment methods that are developed for individuals with apraxia, both for children with apraxia and for adults with apraxia. Whether that, I don't think it really matters too much whether the apraxia is acquired or if it's, apraxia that's congenital or, from birth or from time of the language development. But for children, we typically work on doing certain sounds. So we'll work on certain consonants and vowels together, and kind of work on stringing like a vowel consonant and a vowel together, or a consonant vowel consonant. It's a lot of work on putting those certain combinations together, and working on that. And then with adults, I will be completely honest with you, I'm not as familiar with the adults where I work. Our cutoff is really 21, unfortunately. But I know there are treatment programs for that, and I am happy to research and be able to get back with you on that. If you have an email, I would happily be able to get back with you on it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question about when do you diagnose? I have a grandchild who's almost 2. He only knows maybe 5 or 6 words. They said they thought he might have apraxia. So is there a time to diagnose it?
I do not know if there is a specific cutoff for apraxia. I would, in my professional opinion, I typically would wait until I would say a little closer to preschool and school aged to diagnose apraxia, just so you could discern, is it a speech sound disorder? Or so, it's when I say speech sound disorder, is it one that they're having consistent errors with, like, S's, K's, G's, like consistently with those sounds. Whereas if it's inconsistent, as apraxia typically presents. Does that kind of answer that question? I want to make sure.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
I will just go on the bandwagon. My son did not talk, and after 1 year in school, they said that he was not able to learn to talk. So he did not get any speech therapy throughout all of his school. So I just wonder how different he would be if he had had speech therapy throughout school. I mean, he's 46 years old now, and I don't know if they just didn't know about it or what. But I do think he would be farther along now, because he did have sounds and stuff then, and they're all gone now. And so I really encourage people to get intervention as early as possible.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. That's something that that we are hearing a lot with individuals, around your son's age and everything. That's something in my previous placements and stuff that we were hearing a lot of. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing, and I absolutely agree. Early intervention is key. Absolutely.
I have one question. Is there ever a too late to learn language and to benefit from speech therapy?
I don't think so. In my personal opinion, I don't think so. It's never too late to learn skills. It's never too late to try and acquire new skills. Our brain is always growing and changing, and we learn by creating new pathways in our brain. And no matter the age, I always feel like there's an opportunity to be able to do that. So yeah, absolutely. I think that no matter the age, it's always worth considering, especially as far as services and everything.
Did anybody else have any other questions?
No, but it was a great presentation. That was really very helpful. Very good.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now.
Congratulations on being a newlywed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.